Well, good afternoon. It is always an honor to welcome the University of Delaware's most famous alumnus, Vice President Joe Biden, back to campus. I also welcome Interior Secretary Ken Salazar to UD. It's a particular pleasure when Senator Tom Carper, Representative Mike Castle, and Governor Jack Markell return to the campus as well. I'm especially delighted that you're here to talk about offshore wind power. I know President Obama and Vice President Biden are profoundly committed to environmental sustainability and alternative energy technologies. Clearly, the University of Delaware shares that commitment. We've been a leader in the development of alternative energy technologies since the 1970s. We were the first university in the U.S. to offer a course in offshore wind, and our research in the field is some of the most advanced in the nation. That research will be helped immeasurably by the $1.4 million grant in federal funds going to the construction of a wind turbine at our campus in Lewis, Delaware. The turbine will provide power to the College of Marine and Earth Studies and facilitate marine wind technology R&D, education, policy, and outreach. Mr. Vice President, all of us at the University of Delaware are deeply grateful for this generous support, perhaps none more so than our Dean, Nancy Target. We are committed to wind power because we know that the resource is more than large enough to generate much of the electricity for the mid-Atlantic states. We know, too, that public support for wind power is strong in Delaware. This support is critical, given that just last month, UD committed to reducing its carbon emissions 20% by 2020 and procuring 10% of the electricity we use from clean energy supply. I thank all of the UD faculty leading the nation in marine wind research. You'll hear from one of those leaders, Willett Kempton, in just a few moments. I thank you for visiting the University of Delaware and, even more importantly, for your demonstrated support of the innovative, sustainable solutions. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce Representative Mike Castle. Representative Castle has been an ardent supporter of UD's energy and environmental action initiatives, and we're thrilled he's here with us today. Congressman Castle.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, different President and Vice President in terms of what you do, but it's great to be with both of you, Mr. Secretary. It's good to be with you, sir, and Willett, for your tremendous work with the university. We appreciate it. And Senator Carper and his just great work in the whole area of energy, for which we're all extremely appreciative, and of course our distinguished governor. I am delighted to be here. I also see a number of legislators here, former Governor Peterson, who's very vitally interested in the environment, probably has more of a name for that than any of us. Our former Lieutenant Governor, John Carney, who's very involved with this, and a lot of you from the university who made a difference as far as this is concerned. I'd just like to thank each and every one of you. I think this is vitally important. I can tell you that we, meaning Tom Carper, myself, and Joe when he was there, and even Ted Kaufman now, have been writing a lot of letters to people like our distinguished secretary and the other people who work with him on these various programs and dealing with the rules and regulations on the Outer Continental Shelf and what we can do with respect to this kind of energy, which we consider to be of vital importance. And we're delighted to be able to be here today for this announcement. And as we move forward with the various OCS programs and all that is happening as far as offshore wind is concerned. When you think about this, I mean, people argue about the environment or whatever it may be, but the bottom line is that wind power is clean. I've never seen anything that's remotely negative with respect to that versus almost any other kind of energy we can deal with today. It offers stable pricing. Yes, it won't offer reduced pricing, at least early on. But as you go down the road 15 or 20 years, you may find that is reduced pricing when you see the price of coal and oil and natural gas go up. And my judgment is that that stable pricing will be lesser pricing at some point in the future. Offshore wind parks are unobtrusive. As one who's been going to Rehoboth Beach for many decades now, I don't want to be too obtrusive, and it's not. It is something which should not bother us at all. There is a security issue here. We are indeed being able to derive our energy domestically, locally, and not having to worry about where we're getting oil from or natural gas from. And for that reason, it has a lot of benefits in that way. But I think there's also economic opportunity here. We've seen it at the University of Delaware. Hopefully we can see it in production at some point as far as the future is concerned. We need to get more of that kind of production onshore in the United States of America. They talk about the number of wins. I don't know how many wins, W-I-Ns, there are here. But this is one of those win-win-win-win-win situations. I don't see many negatives, and hopefully we can move forward. And I appreciate the work that the Secretary has done on that, and certainly appreciate working with all of you in terms of making a difference as far as Delaware is concerned in the use of wind energy and efficiency and all those good savings as far as our state is concerned. And with that, I introduce our very distinguished senior United States Senator from the state of Delaware, Mr. Thomas Carper.
It's great being introduced by the Dean of the Delaware delegation in the House of Representatives, you know. Thank you, Michael. Mr. President, thanks for hosting. And Mr. Vice President, thank you for just the great leadership that you're providing for this administration. And I know there's another guy that's helping you, but you're doing great. You're doing great. And I just want to say a special thank you to Ken Salazar, our old compadre in the U.S. Senate, just a wonderful human being. And he's Secretary of the Interior and is helping us in a lot of ways. One is with respect to the national park. We're the only first state in the nation, last state without a national park. And he and the folks in the Department of Interior are just doing a lot to help us, and we're grateful for that. And just grateful to you for pushing through the regulations, the MMS regulations, so we actually get this show on the road. I want to go back in time about 3 or 4 years ago, and I was down at the College of Marine Studies and met with Nancy and Willett and others, and I was a big advocate for solar energy and renewable energy, but hadn't thought a whole lot about offshore wind. And they spent part of the day convincing me that we'd be foolish not to pursue offshore wind off of the coast of Delaware, and frankly off of the mid-Atlantic all the way up to Maine. And as it turns out, there are a number of reasons why. We here in Delaware are at the end of America's tailpipe. Maryland is there with us, New Jersey is there with us, and the reason why we're at the end of America's tailpipe is all the fossil fuel plants, those coal-fired plants from West Virginia, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky, all the way down. They create their cheap electricity, and they put their bad stuff up in the air, and we end up breathing it. And we end up people getting sick, people who miss school, miss work, people who go in the hospital, people who die. This year, 25,000 people in this country will die because of the air pollution that's put up in the air by those sources of electricity. It's cheap electricity for them, but it drives our health care bills right up through the roof. This is a great project for a variety of reasons. One of those is it will provide for healthier air to breathe and for healthier Delawareans and, frankly, for healthier Americans. The second thing it does is it reduces our dependence on fossil fuels, not just coal, not just oil, not just natural gas, but the whole kit and caboodle. The Vice President and our delegation and others were just at the train station. The governor just over at the train station to celebrate the overhaul and really the launch of a major facelift for our train station, which is 100 years old. My vision for transportation in the future includes high-speed rail that comes through the 11th busiest train station in America. That's Wilmington. Carries people from Washington, D.C. up to Maine. Carries them on trains that are powered by electricity, the electricity of which is harvested off the coast of Delaware and from Virginia up to Maine to provide a great ride, hopefully a timely ride, an affordable ride, and a clean ride. And we're going to move literally 28 million people on trains last year. We're being up from that the number this year, and that's part of the vision. The other part of the vision, we had a bunch of electric cars in Washington last week for us to tool around in. A lot of fun, almost as much fun as the one I rode around with you, Will, a couple of weeks ago. But part of the vision is Chevrolet Volt, flex fuel plug-in hybrid, charge it up at night. The electricity is going to come from offshore wind. Offshore wind. We have the potential for harvesting enough offshore wind to provide all the electricity needs from every state, from North Carolina all the way up to Maine, and more, and more. And the last thing I want to mention is, see, John Carney's idea. He came to us with an idea that not only we're going to create create jobs by deploying an offshore wind farm. I think it's about 1,200. About 1,200 will actually rebuild the project, another 200 or 300 to actually operate it. But if we're really smart about it, John came to us with a couple of other people that he's sitting next to, and he said, "You know, we have a steel mill in this state. We have the ability the steel's got to come from someplace to build the foundations on which we mount these windmill farms. Why don't we see if maybe we could take that steel mill plant in Claymont, Delaware, and use that plant to build the foundations, the steel for the foundations for windmill farms from North Carolina all the way up to Maine. Now, would that be a great idea? That would be a great idea. That's the vision. That's the vision. Cleaner air, healthier Americans, harness that wind, reduce our dependence on foreign oil, provide all kinds of jobs, and provide this country with the electricity that we need for a long, long time. It's great to be here with all of you, and especially, Mr. Secretary, thank you for all that you've done to make this day possible. And now, I loved it when I was governor and they would introduce me as His Excellency, the Governor of Delaware. At first I was kind of embarrassed, but over time, Ken, I got better at it. And then after 8 years, when people no longer call me Excellency, I would go home and I'd say, Martha, would you just like once or twice just call me Excellency? He'd say, Excellency, get in here, take out the trash, get the toilet is stopped up. But every now and then I still get called Excellency. But it's my privilege to introduce my friend, His Excellency, the Governor of Delaware, Jack Markell.
Well, thank you, Senator. I hear it as much at home as I'm sure you did as well. President Harker, thank you for hosting us. Mr. Vice President, always great to be with you. And as I was thinking about it standing here, this is really the perfect event for you in that it combines two things that you've been so focused on throughout your career. One is environmental protection. And, Mr. Secretary, should you have the opportunity to visit Cape Henlopen State Park, you'll actually find the Biden Environmental Center there. But the other has to do with economic development and jobs and middle class, good jobs for the middle class. And that's really what this is all about. So it's great to have you here, Mr. Secretary. Thanks for being here. I think the Vice President knows because he sees them, but one of the places, this is the kind of place where Delaware's at its best because we have the federal government, we have state government, we have local government. We have our county executive, Chris Coons, is here. And then it's basically a who's who of the legislature. And if you don't mind, I just would like to introduce them to you very briefly because we've got some terrific people here. Representative Joe Moreau, our former Lieutenant Governor John Carney, our Valerie Longhurst, Majority Whip, John Kowalko in the State House, the Speaker of the House, Bob Gilligan, the Majority Leader of the State Senate, Tony DeLuca, Representative Terry Schooley, Majority Leader Pete Schwarzkopf, and in the back, I see our brand new DNREC Secretary, Department of Natural Resources Secretary, Colin Amara. And I wanted you to know how importantly we take this throughout government and all the folks who are here, as well as former Governor Peterson was introduced, really a hero to the environmental movement here in Delaware as well. Last week, I got to deliver my first State of the State speech, and in that I said that the future of offshore wind as a renewable energy resource for the East Coast is promising, in large part because it really is at the forefront for you and for President Obama, the folks who are really crafting our country's energy policy. And to have you with us today and to have Vice President Biden, the man that the President has put in charge of restoring the prosperity of the American middle class. I mean, to me, it says that the nation's interests and Delaware's interests are really very much aligned. And in that same speech last week, we unveiled an ambitious agenda that we call core prosperity, which is about the creation of real economic prosperity. And that's about getting our state's economy headed in the right direction, creating jobs that are sustainable, creating long-term economic growth. And a critical piece of that does, in fact, come from realizing that the health of our economy and our environment are very much intertwined. It means that as a state and as a nation, we have to avoid trading our dependence upon Saudi oil for dependence upon solar panels and electric vehicles and wind turbines that are produced in China and Japan and in Scandinavia. We've got to put Americans, and certainly from where I stand, more than our fair share of Delawareans to work producing those products. But creating that kind of core prosperity also requires our state government to lead by example. And that means we have proposed, for example, establishing a statewide priority order for new electricity generation. That requires we first look to cost-effective efficiency measures to meet new demand, and then looking at cost-effective renewables like the wind farm to be built off of our coast, and after that, looking at the more traditional fossil fuels. It also means we develop a statewide energy efficiency policy, which means retrofitting our existing state buildings, having new standards for new buildings, additional energy efficiency measures, and also a roadmap to make sure that state government is in fact powered by renewable sources, because we need to lead, in my view, where the nation is going to follow. Now, I understand that talking about green is easy, but capitalizing on the opportunities that it represents is not easy, and frankly, very few states have figured it out yet. And I believe the state which most effectively marshals all the resources available to it will be the state that's most successful, and that means marshaling everything from our natural resources like the offshore wind, but also our intellectual resources, those that reside right here at the University of Delaware, as well as at some local companies. You know, just last year, through the leadership of Tony DeLuca, as well as our Speaker Gilligan, and with the help of the Public Service Commission, including its chair, Arnetta McCrae, Delaware became the first state in the country to secure a power purchase agreement for offshore wind. And that's a very critical thing for people to understand, and it's why Delaware is different. We actually have a signed agreement. Gary Stockbridge from Delmarva, I saw right here. There is actually a real company that has signed a real commitment to purchase that kind of power. And so now that we've got that, it really is about looking to opportunities like the one that the Senator mentioned that John Carney and his team are putting forward to make sure that the steel that produces those the towers and foundations are built here. It's a great project, and I certainly commend John for it. And we've got to encourage the turbine manufacturers to make the turbines here and to assemble them here with easy access to the ocean. These projects may or may not come to fruition, but the point is we've got to constantly work to create these types of synergies where we can. And as we look forward, I also want to just pause for a second and look back to 2005, to a meeting that I vividly remember here on campus when Professor Willett Kempton told me that offshore wind could and should be a viable alternative to help power our state for decades to come. He was incredibly clear, and this is 4 years ago. This is really before a lot of people were talking about it here in Delaware. He was clear, he was compelling, the science was sound, that a lot of us took up that banner and ran with it. And I think importantly, hundreds and in fact thousands of citizens got on that bandwagon, and that was something that really differentiated Delaware from a number of states around the country where citizens really took the lead to make it happen. So Willett said we could do it, and we're doing it. And within a few years from the work that he's doing, and Mr. Secretary, from the work that you're doing, wind energy is clearly now right for Delaware. So it's my honor to introduce the person that I regard as the intellectual father of offshore wind power in Delaware, and certainly one of the nation's leading experts on a source of energy that could help our nation achieve true energy independence, Professor Willett Kempton.
Thank you, Governor Markell. Very much appreciated. And I just want to make sure to note that one person can't do very much, and we've got a big team here. And I want to say on behalf of that whole team, the University of Delaware wind power researchers and students who are here today, we really appreciate this recognition. And I'll just briefly review why we're being recognized and call out a few people who have been able to come today. Most of our offshore wind team is in Chicago at the American Wind Energy Association meetings, but there are a few who came, and some of them delayed flights, and we're hoping we're going to get on standby tonight. But there's 4 things that we've done that are key, and I very much appreciate earlier speakers referring to them. I'll just review very quickly. We determined, 1, we determined the size of the wind resource. 2, we determined the level of public support. 3, we provided credible, objective information to decision makers. And 4, we're training students to staff this new industry. So first, how big is the resource? Several speakers have made a mention of that. But when we started on this, the great state of New Jersey to our north was saying they weren't going to do offshore wind because there wasn't enough even to meet new demand for electricity. So that was input going to decision makers. We said, well, how'd you get that information? It's Joe told Sally, who told somebody in the governor's office. So we did a definitive study, a team led by Professor Rich Garvine, unfortunately deceased, a great man to work with. Amardeep Danju, if you could just put your hand up or something. And I did that. So what was the result? Using proven technology that's available today, wind off Delaware shores can generate 5 times the electricity needed to run the whole state. Nobody knew that before the study was done. Then we did expand it to the whole Northeast, and that was, as was mentioned briefly, the resource for Massachusetts through North Carolina, and you can do it up to Maine. The resource is enough to displace all electricity, all heating fuels, and all gasoline used by all those coastal states. It's a huge resource. Let's compare it to offshore oil off the Atlantic, another resource the Secretary is concerned with. Offshore wind can deliver 16 times the energy of all the Atlantic offshore oil. You don't know these things until you really crank the numbers. Second topic, will the public oppose it? That's the other thing we were told. They thought shore opposition would block offshore wind anywhere in the U.S. as it had in Cape Cod. Professor Jeremy Firestone and I used surveys and found that in Delaware, 85% of the public wanted it. Not only were they not opposed, they would rather have it than other sources of power. Okay, third, we've provided objective information to decision makers, and after doing the studies and publishing them, we didn't stop there. We didn't just send it off to the peer-reviewed literature. We worked to get the word out to public officials and private firms in a decision-relevant form. Many Delaware leaders, including those on the podium today, were early supporters of offshore wind, and the legislature sitting on in the audience here were very important in making this get to a PPA that was signed by both Delmarva Power and Blue Water Wind. The untirable CEO of Blue Water Wind, Peter Mandelstam, is here today, one of the most dogged men I know, going through that long process led by the PSC and Commission Chair Arnetta McRae. But in this process, we had 3,000 Delaware citizens comment, and any member of the PSC will tell you that's about 2,998 more than usually comment on a PSC hearing. And Jackie Piero, another of our students, is studying that whole process, the comments and what people said and why they seem to be motivated to participate. And I'd like to mention Jim Black back here and Tom Noyes are two of the many activists who organized and got information out and were very involved in that whole process. The fourth thing we're doing is educating students for this new industry. As President Harker mentioned, Delaware developed the first course in the U.S. on offshore wind power, which Professors Verone, Firestone, and I now teach. I don't think Professor Verone made it today. In mechanical engineering, Professors Schwartz, Prasad, and Avanti. I see Prasad back there. If you could put your hand up. Teach the engineering of wind turbines and blades. We're in the process of creating a wind engineering graduate certificate program to add a one-year graduate program for people who want to go into the industry from another profession. So the magic combination of science, innovation, education, citizen engagement, private entrepreneurship, and a supportive state government. What was the result? For Delaware, a historic new source of electricity at competitive prices. For the nation, a new industry. So before I introduce Secretary Salazar, let's just recognize, as other speakers have alluded to, he got the long-stalled federal rules for offshore wind out very quickly. And I think Senator Carper helped a bit with that, with a few nudges, but we'll give the credit to Secretary Salazar today. He settled an interagency dispute. He has earned some bragging rights should he choose to take them. Let me introduce the Secretary of Interior.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let me, first of all, begin by saying that I am here today because Senator Tom Carper said, I want you to go to Delaware to see what we're doing on offshore wind and also to deal with the issues with respect to being the only state in the nation that does not have a national park. I had to say yes to him because he had to vote for confirmation for me. And he probably, Senator Biden would have, Vice President Biden would have held me up had I not said yes. So thank you, Tom, for your invitation. To the Vice President, it is always, always an honor to be with him. I consider him not only to have been a great friend of mine in the United States Senate, but also with his entire family, with Jill and Bo and Hunter, and having spent a lot of time with them. They are people of the heart who are always working so hard on behalf of the nation and on behalf of Delaware. So thank you for being with us, Vice President, Governor, President, Congressman, and Professor. Thank you for being here today. Let me make just a couple of quick points. First, from the point of view of President Obama and Vice President Biden and the Department of Interior, we recognize that we are moving forward in a new world, a new world that is tackling a new energy frontier and also creating the solutions that will deal with the issues of climate change, which we are experiencing in our entire globe. That is one of the signature issues of our time. And President Obama and Vice President Biden have directed me as Secretary of Interior to move forward and to embrace this challenge that faces all of us. That challenge is one that we will face head-on because of the fact that the policy issues are inescapable now in 2009. The policy drivers of national security, of economic security, and environmental security are here with us from now and into the future. And so in the Department of Interior, where we oversee the 1.75 billion acres of the Outer Continental Shelf, and we also oversee about 20% of the landmass of the United States of America, we will do our part to make sure that we are harnessing the power of the sun, the power of geothermal, the power of the wind, the power of the other renewable energy resources. And in the Outer Continental Shelf and here in Delaware today, we are moving forward as expeditiously as we can to make sure that we see the growing energy industry out in the Outer Continental Shelf from wind power. I want to just review a few of the statistics. We expect that by the end of this year, we will have somewhere around 10 to 12 applications for offshore wind projects in the Outer Continental Shelf. And it goes beyond Delaware. I'll spend a minute just on Delaware, but in New Jersey alone, Governor Corzine and Senator Lautenberg, Senator Menendez have been pushing hard for 3 projects that they envision off the coast of New Jersey, each of which will produce 350 megawatts of power. So that's over 1,000 megawatts of power just in New Jersey. Rhode Island, Deepwater Wind Project of 385 megawatts, and in New York, an RFP has already been issued so that by the end of the year, a multi-phase project with 3 350 megawatt wind power farms will be moving forward. So think about that just in the context that people can understand. A 350 megawatt wind farm essentially produces as much electricity as comes from a medium-sized coal-fired power plant. So that gives you a context with respect to these projects. Here in Delaware, obviously through the leadership of everybody who is in this room, the state leaders as well as the private sector, you have one project that has been proposed, which is a very important project. It will be the largest of all of these projects, proposed 450 megawatt production, an $800 million investment. We are getting close, hopefully here, in the next couple of weeks to the point where we are going to move forward with the issuance of a permit that will allow the research and development of that project to move forward. And we look forward to coming back here to Delaware in the next several years to actually be in a position where we are celebrating the opening up of this wind power farm. Now, let me say this. I think seeing is believing. You know, on the onshore in Colorado, I remember in 2004, where we were starting off with a renewable portfolio standard. We had very little wind energy in Colorado. And 2 years later, we were almost up to the point where we had 2,000 megawatts of power. We are going to see the exact same thing happening along the Atlantic coast with the great interest and with the high quality of winds that we have in the offshore. We're going to see this wind energy come alive. And because of the history that the University of Delaware and Delaware have had with respect to wind power, I expect that Delaware is going to be at the point of the spear in terms of making this new energy source a reality. With that, let me just introduce my wonderful friend, the Vice President of the United States of America. It is an honor for me to be here with him. It is an honor to be here in his home state because he used to come home every night on that train to be with his family. It's where his values were forged. It was at this university where he was educated. And the United States of America and this world are truly blessed to have Joe Biden as our Vice President, the Vice President of the United States.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you. Mr. President, I can assure you, had I graduated from Rutgers, we'd still be here. you believe that, then you don't understand politics. Look, folks, it's great to be home. It's great to be here at my alma mater. And it's great to be in a room. I've spent more serious time in this room today than I did when it was a library, which it was here, this room, when I was here as a student. But it is genuinely good to be home. And I've been telling, as Senator Carper has, I've been telling my good friend, and this is, we always, as my colleagues in the state legislature, you refer to your colleagues as good friends, but this guy really is a good and loyal friend for a considerable amount of time. As a matter of fact, I blame him for my son running for Attorney General. I advised him no, and he went to see Ken Salazar, who was Attorney General, and so Ken's totally responsible. But look, all kidding aside, the fact of the matter is Ken has heard me and Tom and probably Mike and others. I remind people, Governor, we had the first solar home here on the university. I remember when we started off, as you point out, Mr. President, as early as the 70s, the university sort of began to stake its claim on alternative energy. And so this is not new for us. We have not been recognized for it necessarily nationally until recently. But the truth of the matter is this has been an incredibly environmentally conscious state as well as university. And I'd be remiss if I didn't again recognize Governor Peterson, who did what probably, I think, paved the way for us being able to sustain this state in a way that wouldn't have occurred before, the Coastal Zone Act. It was a gigantic, it was such a departure from business as usual back in 1971, that in the 70s, early 70s, that I think it set the stage for so much more. And I look over here at a man who should have been the director of EPA. He was the acting director, and through pure politics was held up by our friends in the other party from being able to be confirmed as the director of the EPA, but a guy who has been working in this, Mike McCabe, for longer than many of you and I have been. He goes back all the ways to the days when he was working with Senator Hart and the establishment of Earth Day and a lot of other things. Michael, you deserve a great deal of credit. I want to acknowledge you. Mr. President, I get energized every time I just come on campus. The students here at the University of Delaware, they get it. As some of the students you pointed out, the graduate students here, they get the impact of leading greener lives. It not only helps us all today, but it's going to allow their children to live a much better tomorrow than we're living today. And the good news is we recognize it as well, all of us in here, the state legislators and the university personnel and the people standing to my left and my right. Mr. President, Secretary Salazar, the entire administration sees the everlasting benefits of a clean energy future. This is a moment. This is a moment that comes seldom in history. It's probably occurred 5 or 6 times in the history of the United States, where we reach an inflection point that is so consequential for the next generations, not because of the merit or demerit of those in power, but because the nature of the change that has taken place in the world and the country. It's an inflection point. And we are determined. President Obama, we were senators when we started planning this before we got sworn in Chicago in late November and December and January. We are absolutely, fundamentally committed to the notion that we're going to lay down a new foundation for the economic as well as the environmental future of this country. This is the moment. We get criticized by many for proposing the Recovery Act. We get criticized for saying we have to deal with energy, education, and health care all at once. We should just worry about getting the economy back. We cannot lead the world in the 21st century. Let me say it again. We cannot without a fundamental shift in our education, energy, and health care policy. So it's not a question of doing too much. There is no option. It is now. 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 And for those who say that we could not invest the money in the Recovery Act, let me tell you, Failure to invest now would put us in a position where we would be behind the curve for the next generation, in my humble opinion. Because much of what the Secretary is able to do here, much of what we're able to do out of the Department of Energy and out of the Department of Housing and Urban Affairs, all of which have energy impacts, is being funded on a one-time basis with the boldest initiative any administration has ever attempted in the midst of an economic recession, a $787 billion down payment on the future. Failure to act would result in 4 to 5 million additional lost jobs. So it's a process, folks. And in this process, we really genuinely believe, and I know here at the university you believe, we're in the beginning stages of beginning to change the world. I know that sounds like hyperbole. I'm back on campus, and I feel as idealistic as I did when I was a 29-year-old kid summing up my campaign here for the United States Senate on campus. I am more certain, I am more committed, I am more idealistic about our opportunities than I have been the day I got elected to office as a 29-year-old kid. I genuinely mean it. Seldom do we get delivered to a point where we have an option, an opportunity to literally alter the course of human history. And it's like turning around a supertanker, folks. You change the heading of a supertanker by 5 degrees. 50 miles out, you're way off in a different direction than you were before you changed it. And that's where we are right now. You know, in the most literal sense, that's why we're here today. That's why we've chosen such a great university. Now, I'm prejudiced. I know. I'm not joking about this. I say to the press and the national press that's here, I went here. It's a great university, but it's even a greater university by a long shot. And we got a guy now at the helm of this university who has visions for this university that are totally, completely warranted. And with the help of the legislature and the help of the people of the state of Delaware and the help of the philanthropies and the fundraising that go on, we, in fact, are going to be able to realize President Harker's dream for this university. This is a premier institution, and no more than in the area of the kind of advancements we're talking about here. You know, this really is about making the world better. And I'm not just because I'm saying this because I'm on a university campus. It's about the air we breathe. It's about the water we drink. It's about the mountains our children are going to be able to climb, and it's about the lakes we swim in and the oceans that nourish us and literally renew our souls. You know, that's the world we intend to change. All of us, and I'm sure you all share my view, Democrats and Republicans. You know, we've already begun. It's been just slightly more than 100 days. The Recovery Act includes $11 billion to bolster state and local governments on one item alone, energy efficiency. Energy efficiency programs to weatherize low-income homes that are already being put to work, for example. Jack talked about the state buildings and the federal buildings. I need not tell experts like you, sir, professor, that the single biggest bang for the buck we could get is not with these wind turbines. That's the future, the immediate future. It's literally just weatherizing, conservation. The single biggest bang for the buck we can get. And we've been criticized for spending Recovery Act money to do that. Today, here in Delaware, we're doing that. We're doing a lot more. As the President announced on Earth Day, the Department of the Interior is releasing the regulations that will govern the development of renewable energy in the offshore waters. These final rules are going to enable Delaware and enable the nation to tap into our ocean's vast, vast sustainable resources to generate clean energy in an environmentally sound and safe manner. And with the release of these rules, we can much better harness the wind here in Delaware, but also solar, wave, and ocean current energy along our nation's coast. The prospects are unlimited. The prospects are unlimited. And it's time for us to dream really big, not small, not just in terms of whether or not we can actually provide the electricity for 50,000 or 100,000 or 200,000 homes in Delaware. It is so much bigger than that. And we're trying to do our part to spur investment A significant portion. This is not the first. This is multiple times that I've dealt with wind energy projects, just out of Missouri, John. And I got to talk to you about what they're doing out there in creating, in the steel mills and the turbines they're creating. But not only that, the transformers that are being built. Guess what happens? This ultimately is about jobs. It's jobs, 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 jobs. Bobby, we can't in Delaware. We're losing jobs where people can buy a single job, live a decent way, make a decent wage, have a sustainable income that can't be exported, the job, that allow people to live in a middle-class neighborhood like you and I grew up in. Used to work at General Motors or Chrysler. God willing, we'll be able to save some of it, we hope. But the truth of the matter is, there's so many spin-offs here. And so the tax system that we wrote into the legislation provides financial incentives to projects like the one here in Delaware. It's not just the regulations being issued. It's a significant incentive. Let's not kid ourselves. You can write the regulations, boss. It ain't going, no matter what the state does, without these tax incentives. Across the country, the Recovery Act invests about $14 billion in renewables by allowing wind producers not only to access the investment tax credit, but also supports production tax credits. It also, thanks to the Recovery Act, the Department of Energy is spending $6 billion to underwrite up to $60 billion in loans. $60 billion in loans for renewable energy projects in the next 18 months. And that's for projects just like the one we have here in Delaware. Basically, between all of our efforts, I mean everyone in this room, including the citizens of this state, we can finally truly get serious about our commitment to renewable energy of all types. Not any one of these things are enough. You need to create the synergy to get this thing moving. And we have the combination of the intellectual horsepower, the ingenuity, the policy changes needed that government had to supply to incentivize businesses to move in ways that they want to move, in cooperation with the public sector. But, you know, this is more than just a new source of energy, in my view. And I go back to the purpose of the Recovery Act, which contains this money, these direct and indirect tax expenditures. It is a new source of job creation, a new place for America to assert international leadership in climate change. And most important, it's a way to build a platform for the economy of the future. John, it's not just the platforms you're going to build for these windmills. It goes much more than that. It's a fundamentally new approach to creating jobs that are not exportable, that pay a decent living union wage, and allow people to be able to turn to their kids and say, honey, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I want to remind you what President Obama and I have a simple proposition we both independently and when we ran together jointly talked about. The measure of whether or not we succeed in economic growth is not whether the GDP increases. It's whether or not we increase the ranks of the middle class. It's whether or not we raise the living standard of middle-class workers. Now, remind you, we had great economic growth in the end of the 19th century. But guess what? They weren't decent-paying jobs. So if we went out and created another 10 million jobs paying minimum wage, we would view that as a failure. A failure. The middle class has been left behind. It will not be left behind on our watch. And a green economy is the automobile of the future. It is the technology of the future. And so, folks, the economy and the environment, for the first time in my 37 years of holding high public office, they are the same shade of green. We used to have those arguments, Bob, about whether or not by moving to a green economy we were going to cost ourselves jobs, cost ourselves economic opportunity. Well, it's the opposite now. We've reached that point. as I said earlier, that inflection point where jobs, economic growth, and the environment are the same shade of green, Gov. And so, I see firsthand everywhere I go. A couple weeks ago, as I said, I was at a transformer plant in Missouri, by the way, run by the UAW, putting people back to work as a consequence of building new wind farm projects out there in the central part of the state. As a consequence of that order, because of the tax credits made available, we're building another new 100 windmills out there. Guess what? They had to build these turbines. They had to build these transformers. And it saved jobs, good paying jobs. So this, in a nutshell, is the story of the Recovery Act. This is a story of how a new economy predicated on innovation, the environment, and efficiency is inspiring the kind of growth we need to build the 21st century to lead the world once again. This is a story that stretches across Delaware, up and down our state, and throughout the entire country. And it's a story we're writing together. We've heard for years that a greener economy is going to benefit our grandkids, and it will. It clearly will. But guess what? It also will jumpstart our economy today. That's the whole story. The whole story is that building a green economy is for us as well as our children. It's going to increase the bottom lines through greater efficiency, lower gas prices, reducing dependence on foreign oil, return America to its rightful place as the leading edge of progress in the world. And those of you who travel the world are saddened when you find out we're not viewed that way in so many other countries. We plan on recapturing that. As we do all of that, we're leaving men and women with jobs that cannot be exported, jobs that will form the foundation for this new economy, and jobs that they can keep forever. This right here is how we're going to rebuild the economy. And this right here is how we'll quite literally begin to change the world. So I want to thank the brilliant professors here and the students here at the university for your innovative notions and your willingness to plow in on this for so long, for so many years, finally beginning to be rewarded, finally beginning to be listened to. I want to thank the governor for his leadership, and it's real, it's genuine. I want to thank the private sector for deciding that this is a place where we should be investing. And I want to thank Ken Salazar and my colleagues in the Senate for being so supportive of this kind of leap. But I want to make it clear to you, if all we do is create one wind farm out there, if we don't, as a consequence of that, restore steel plants, if we don't, as a consequence of that, restore jobs, go through the numbers, and I will not take the time now. If we do what we have at our disposal to do right here in Delaware, we're going to save tens of millions of dollars. We're going to create hundreds of good, durable, sustaining jobs, and we're going to lead the country in renewing our commitment to innovation and transforming this economy. And I've always believed that's what this university had the capacity to be on the ground floor of doing. And once again, you are, Mr. President. So to all of you, I say thank you. God bless you for what you're doing, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.